Okay, let's see if this works this time. So I think I sorted out the problem yesterday, and it is totally that Facebook broke everything with their new Pages experience. I have just finished trying 3 different devices to get it to work right. Because I was going to try, well, if StreamYard isn't working and it's like kicking me out of stuff, maybe I'll just go over to Facebook by itself and just do a Facebook live stream. And no, no, that wasn't going to work at all. So we are here at a very different part of my house. You've probably never seen this part. This is what we call the Tolkien room. Uh, you can see the map up there. Illyria was reading J.R.R. Tolkien since they were like 5. And this is the room of all of the editions of Tolkien, all of the books Illyria was reading as a kiddo, and a whole bunch of like Tolkien artwork and stuff, most of which you're not going to get a chance to see because we are pointed toward where the kefi is also stored. This big mass of stuff here is the batch that was made or started on October 31st, 2020. It is called Phoenix, about rising from our ashes. And I had changed the recipe up a little bit to have just a touch less fruit and a little bit more frankincense and myrrh. And as a result, it is very, very hard and resiny in a way that the other kefis are not. To give you a good idea, this was the first batch, and it's almost like fudge or toffee. It's very, very thick and sticky. And that one is from 2019. So like it didn't harden over time. This one has gotten really, really hard. So it's going to be a little tricky to roll. And I think that I will continue to futz with the recipe because this is just a little bit unpleasant to roll. On the other hand, it's not as sticky, so when I ship it, it's not going to like stick together quite so much. Like we've got the silver mirror over here, which we dust with benzoin, Styrax, in order to keep it from sticking together quite so much. Or our other one, my favorite actually, this one is called Lunar Eclipse, started on the night of the lunar eclipse, and it's a slightly different recipe, and it contains dragon's blood. It is magically attuned for protection during the dark hours. It's dusted in dragon's blood, so it's got that like warm, rich color to it. Slightly sweeter scent profile. This one has more, a little bit more cinnamon, because I don't know how many people know the story of the phoenix. In Egyptian myth, the phoenix is known as the Benu bird. Benu, B-E-N-U, is usually how it's Anglicanized. But the story of the phoenix in Greek myth is it's this bird that is a migratory bird, and every year, or every 500 years, it comes back to the place of its birth, and it builds a nest of cinnamon branches and frankincense and myrrh branches and branches of all of these sacred, very costly plants that give us incense and resins and whatnot. And that nest becomes a funeral pyre, and the phoenix sits upon the nest, burns itself to ashes, and then the new phoenix is reborn from the ashes of that pyre. So like the idea of this pyre of cinnamon branches bringing birth and renewal through flame has electrified my imagination since I heard the story when I was itty bitty bitty. So anyway, that's why I've got a lot of cinnamon in that one to kind of harness the phoenix energy. I'm going to apologize if I miss comments because like I'm kind of like way back here to get everything in frame, and I am right at that point in my near 50s where bifocals might do me some good. Oh, Nancy, this is very expensive to make. Dragon's blood by itself, like I made the dragon's blood one, and because of the pandemic, a lot of these things, they're all imported. Almost all of them are imported, and they're coming from, Iran, Iraq, uh, Oman, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. They're all over the place, and um, two things: shipping has become very difficult. Uh, all of the nonsense in the U.S. with post office, but also like just all the logistics of whole countries shutting down. And then a lot of these things are wildcrafted, so you just don't have the people because everybody's got their own stuff going on. So they're not out and necessarily harvesting frankincense for us folks in the U.S. to put into our bougie incense. So yes, it's very expensive. It's turned into a ridiculously expensive hobby, especially because I keep trying to make it as true to the original ancient recipes as possible. There's a lot of power to it. Like it's a fascinating scent. Like it's like nothing we get on the market for incense anymore. And that alone has driven it. But I don't want to like just yammer on about it, but it's so much fun. Uh, Bifocals aren't much help. Yeah, I've actually hit that point. I do have reading glasses, and there's this like window of no glasses fix this one spot in my vision where it's just like I'm just gonna hold the books that close. The screens are right up on my nose, and that's fine. I don't care. So one of the other things about kefi or kapet, as it was originally known, is it's very time consuming. So you make this over a period of 10 to 15 days, depending on how many ingredients, because technically, if you're doing it by the book, you are adding a single ingredient a day, accompanying that with prayers and music. The thing is the temples where the recipes reside, they're scribed on the walls. The prayers didn't come down to us. Like they just sort of assumed that you knew them. So for modern recreation, uh, what I do is just add a new ingredient each day. It can have up to as many as 18 individual ingredients, which means that you're making this stuff over a period of 10 to 18 days and setting it out and letting it not quite ferment, but steep. Wine is a part of this whole thing, and honey. And then you have to let it sit and cure for 3 to 6 months. When I make it in the summer here in Northeast Ohio, it's really damp because of the lake not far away. So with the high humidity, this stuff can take 6 months, sometimes 8 months to cure to a point where it's like really handleable. But this one, since I made it in the winter, it gets real dry here in the winter, and I upped the resin content. This one is a little easier to handle, and it has cured a little faster. I'm hoping to be able to have stuff sort of magically available by a specific date in January for rebirth and to kind of bring that energy of change and rising from our ashes and coming out of a really hard time and sloughing that off and making the most of a new year, changing things and all of that stuff. So the other thing is of course you hand roll it. It is time consuming, in a word. Let's see, roller clay beads. Oh, there's a roller for clay bead. I will look into that. I didn't know. I've been like sort of poking around at the different types of all the different craft things that are out there. This has sort of like taken over portions of my house, as you can see. Like this is a guest bedroom, and it's just there's kefi all over here. There's kefi all over there. There's like all of the bins for like the powders to cover the kefi. We just moved all of the incense supplies to the alchemy nook in the basement. I would be filming from there, but sadly, the internet connection was just being very funky. Uh, I'm looking into a mesh network for the house. It's either that or get 2 routers, because I tried boosters and that didn't do shit. To be fair, we've just redone the basement, and there are a lot of heavy wood bookcases built into the walls now, thanks to our friend Griffin, and a lot of sound insulation and other stuff, because we do ritual and stuff down there, and not to mention any of the woogity mystical stuff. Like House Keperu has done its seasonal rituals. So like 8 times a year minimum, we get together and, prior to the pandemic, and do our seasonal rituals and whatnot. And we've been doing that since we bought this house in 2004, 2005. So like, 15 years minimum of dedicated magical work and ritual work have gone down into the space there. And I am a believer that that kind of stuff changes a space. It makes the barriers between flesh and spirit a little bit more permeable. But the side effect is, I also think that makes these technological things not work quite so well. That might be confirmation bias, but they are always finicky down there. Yeah, this stuff is noticeably stiff. I wish I had smell-o-vision though. It's this one with the higher frankincense and cinnamon content. It's got a pine note and warm spice. It's very resiny. I haven't burned it yet, and that's another thing about this incense is you don't stick it directly on a hot charcoal. You don't actually burn it so much as you kind of treat it like a high temperature wax melt. So you need to put it on something that is usually between about 150 and 180 Fahrenheit. And you let it warm and release its scent that way. There's a point where it gets like all hard and crunchy, and then you can take it and pound it down once it's cooled, and then you can use it a little bit more like a traditional Western incense and just put it on a charcoal. The first type, where you just heat it on something, you don't get a lot of smoke. You get much more smell. You get like all of these nuanced scents with it. If you reuse it, that means it's hardened, and you put it on a charcoal, then it's like this copious white smoke, and the scent is changed. Definitely, you get a lot more of the frankincense scent and a little bit less of the sweetness, because this has honey and raisins and wine. This version also has figs. This style of incense making was popular throughout the ancient Mediterranean, and the base was dried fruit and wine and honey. And the dried fruit could be raisins, could be dates, could be figs. I've had the best luck with figs and golden raisins. The very first batch I made in 2019, I made with dates, and that stuff is a sticky nightmare. It's what, 2 years old now, going on, and it's taken so long to cure to a point where I can do what I'm doing here, just rolling it. But if there are fancy little things that will let me like roll stuff quickly and easily, I may have to look at that. Like I said, I've tried to go real old school with this and do it all by hand. Rolling the kefi was also a sacramental, magical thing. In ancient Egypt, actually, you can see it on the necklace that I wear all the time. If you've ever wondered about this, it's an ankh with a scarab in it. And that scarab is connected to the Egyptian god Khepra. Also, the word keper, keperu, keperkui, it means to change, to become, to transform. Khepra is depicted as a dung beetle, a scarab beetle, who rolls the ball of the sun, and is responsible for the rebirth in the morning. You'll note that there's a whole lot of like rebirth imagery with all of this stuff. Well, that whole like collecting the dung ball and having new life come out of this ball of detritus and stuff. If you look at these little balls of kefi, they look like rabbit pellets. I mean, there's no two ways about it. When rolling it, it looks kind of like rabbit doo-doo, or the dung ball that a scarab has rolled. And that was also part of like the symbolism, like you're rolling the ball that the sacred son will be born from. So kefi was a sacred temple incense. It was burned in the evenings. It was believed to have properties that opened the mind, that opened sort of the veil between this world and the next. It excited the imagination, it opened the way of dreams, and it facilitated communication with spirits and the gods. Creating it was, if you're familiar with the Catholic idea of transubstantiation, where you're taking a physical thing and you make it into literally the body of the god, this was recreating the body of Osiris. That's why it was something that you would do piece by piece over a series of days in this sort of painstaking process with music and incense and chanting and hymns. And we know that this was done because we have stories recorded by historians and writers like Plutarch, who were writing during the Greek and Roman times, Greek particularly, when Egypt was sort of taken over by Hellenic Greece and the Ptolemies. And they were fascinated by many of the old traditions that had come down from thousands of years ago. Back then, I mean, Egypt was old, a very, very old nation. And the earliest mentions of this incense as kapet, although there's no real good sense of like what went into it, go all the way back to like 3200 BCE. I mean, forever ago. So this is a fun labor of love. Anywho, yeah, the recipes. Okay, so like a bullet. How do you burn the round? Okay, so how do you burn the round rolled balls? These aren't self-burning, so they have to have a heat source. And the best thing to do, honestly, like what they used to do is literally take the ball itself and put it on the heat source and let it sort of just fume. I have found that if you want to get the most bang for your buck, when you finally get your kefi, take the little ball and squish it flat, and then put that flat bit on whatever you have to heat it up, and then kind of play with temperatures between 150 Fahrenheit and 180 Fahrenheit, much higher than that. And the sugar in this, it's got a very high sugar content because of the raisins and the wine and the honey. That will scorch if you overheat it, which is why you don't want to put it directly on a charcoal. You can kind of get creative if all you have are self-lighting charcoals, and you have the self-lighting charcoal in on sand or whatever in a safe container, and you sort of like get a bunch of tin foil and sort of like make a thing that holds it just above the charcoal, or you wait for the charcoal to get red and then start to burn down so that there's a lot of ash on it, so it's not at its hottest, and you can kind of get away with the kefi at that point. Folks have had some decent luck using those little burners that are usually carved out of soapstone and have a candle in the bottom of them and like a little stone bowl, and the candle heats either the stone or the metal bowl. My only caveat for that is this stuff is very resiny, and it is very sticky once it goes and melts. So you will want something like tin foil to cover that bowl, or like one of those little tarts, like the little tart tins for wax melts, because otherwise you are never getting the stain off of that bowl. You will always and forever have some of this. And so anything else you put into it after that is going to smell a little bit like whatever vintage of kefi you were burning first. The best burners for it, because this style of incense while not made exactly like this, but similar to this, incense that's meant to be warmed and heated rather than burned, is still in use in the Middle East. And it's called bakur, Bakhoor. And there are bakur burners that you can find in the market. They're really cool. They've got electric ones. You just plug them in the wall. And some of them come with a dial where you can control how hot they get, because different woods and different resins optimally release their scents at different temperatures. So one thing I learned on this whole journey is we're sort of wasting a lot of our incense. Like we're doing terrible things to like our frankincense and our myrrh when we just take a bunch of it and we dunk it on a red hot charcoal and just like get all of that fumy smoke. And you know, if you like me, you've ever done that, like it's over and done very quickly. Like you get the smoke and it fills the room, and you get some frankincense scent, but it doesn't last very long, and that stuff is costly. Uh, you know, some of it, like Arabian myrrh, is what, the last I checked, like $60 a pound. So you know, that's no joke to just go up and smoke in like, you know, 2 minutes. The bakur burners and the other electric burners that you can find from like China and Japan, they will heat it up so it releases its scent slowly. It starts out much more slowly, so it's subtle at first, and then it just starts to permeate the space. So I recommend looking into a bakur burner or an electric burner, or in a hot plate. Seriously, this stuff is very, very sticky. Yeah, the condiment cups are the best things. Or what do they use them for? I know a bunch of the incense places that they almost look like, you know, like little half pastry tins. I know the bakur burner companies sell them. There's a company called Mermaid, but spelled Made, Magical Arts, and they sell I'm pretty sure it's a Japanese burner. It's beautiful, but it's like $70. So just, you know, kind of be aware of that. Attar Mist, Attar Mist, Mist, is a company that sells bakur burners, and you can find an electric one there for, I don't know, between $15 and $20. A little bit more expensive if you want the luxury of being able to control the temperature. But you know, if you fiddle with it, you can kind of find like what works best for you. Public service announcement: never let anything burn unattended. Don't put it on, walk away, especially when flames are involved, or burning hot charcoals, especially if you have pets. One of the things about kefi is it was edible, and actually was used as both a medicine and a breath freshener. So it's not made of anything that's explicitly toxic. I would still be careful about it around your pets because they can have very finicky systems, and you don't want, like tea tree oil will cause kidney failure and liver failure in cats, just if you have if you just have a diffuser around your pets. So be mindful of your small furries, and don't let them go poking around in the stuff, because they're tiny and they react to things a little bit more severely than we will. So things that are not toxic to us can kill them. Be aware of that. One of the reasons I'm spelling stuff is so the 2 times that I managed to knock myself off of the StreamYard stream yesterday, and this is totally because of Facebook, is if I go in here and I try to post something to you guys and I type it, with the Facebook new pages experience, it hits some sort of weird snag, and it logs me out of Facebook because it's stupid. It's being annoying, and so I'll just spell all of the things out so you can put it in your notebook and look it up. Honestly, that's useful too, because we'll probably log these, and it's not like you can see the comments or what I type out in the archive. blessing and curse is I'm going to smell like this incense for the next 3 days, like every time I touch my face and every time I wash my hair. I have heard from folks that they've taken like just one piece and like, mixed it in with a lotion or melted it in with a candle and had a really good result with that. Uh, it's it's actually pretty versatile stuff. Every once in a while, I'll find a piece. This one's a good. Nope, it's this one where some of the ingredients, some piece of wood, I think in this case, didn't quite get chopped up enough, so it's like just big and pokey. Uh, so I usually save those for myself because they never look round, they just look weird. Yeah, I don't know what Facebook did with their page's new experience. How long did it take to make this batch? That's a better thing than bitching about how Facebook broke itself. So I started this one on the night of October 31st, and I made like all the additions over, I think, about 10 days, and it has been curing since. So aside from a couple of little test balls to see like, is it done yet? Is it done? This is the first day of it is finished, and it will probably go up on the website in the next couple of days. Um, I will make an announcement when we've actually got it packaged and ready for sale. Folks on my Patreon always get first crack at stuff. And I will say the kefi tends to go very quickly, but as you can see, there's quite a lot of it. We're out of any version of like the temple incense, which was the very first one that I made. I mean, technically not completely out because I found hiding over an inspiration house one last log of it from the original batch, and I haven't decided if I'm going to keep that for me or if I'm going to make some of that available. I call them vintages because every one of them comes out a little different. It reminds me of brewing. I used to make mead. Can't drink alcohol, but I used to brew it. And you can use the exact same recipe, but if, especially when fruit and other like plant matter is involved, depending on, how was the growing season that year and where did you source it? And is it like quality A or is it quality D? Like all of those factors go in and every one of them change the result, even by tiny increments. But especially in something that is as nuanced as this, you notice a difference. So each little artisanal batch of bougie incense is exactly its thing and will never be exactly like this again. And I make use of that uniqueness when I add in like the magic to all of them, like making them with intention and focus, like with the Phoenix batch, which I started on the night of the lunar eclipse over the summer. And it was at the time when like everything started to get really, really scary. And there were all of the protests, and it just looked like the world was on fire on top of the pandemic. And I felt that what we really needed at that time, and like what I wanted to pull out of that time, was the sense of protection during our darkest hours. So that magic went into that one. Silver mirror, kefi's original use as a temple incense to open the gates of dream and to encourage spirit communication and kind of psychic experience, that all went into silver mirror. So it's a scrying incense. And you can use them just because they smell neat and are unique. It's not like you have to get into the magic, but it seems for the amount of work that has to go into it, I mean, why not go the extra mile, right? And have I used black sage? No, I have not. I have for sage, my favorite is usually dipped in dragon's blood. Although I've been experimenting pretty widely with the idea of fuming with different herbs is something that you find in multiple cultures. So I've been, digging around in old textbooks and primary materials to see what different cultures used. When we didn't have access to sage, what did we burn? We didn't always have frankincense and myrrh, thyme, rosemary, different strewing herbs like meadowsweet. It used to be called fumigation, and it's was used to kind of combat malaria, not the disease, but the Roman idea of mal air, like bad air, that sickness and um, disease, both physical and otherwise, was carried on bad gusts of stale air, and you would cleanse that air with good sense. My phone has buzzed at me twice now. Oh no. More news about somebody losing a parent to COVID. That has just been the state of things. Anyway, uh, yeah, every once in a while. This particular one is not up on the website yet, but my website, michellebelanger.com/incense, will take you to probably more information than you ever wanted to know about kefi, including I post full recipes. So if you want to try your hand at it, you're welcome to do so. I will warn you, it will consume your life. Also, it's really expensive. Some of these things are really hard to get a hold of. There is one ingredient that is a royal pain in the ass to get your hand on, and I haven't found a workable substitute. It is called gum mastic. It is something that is only, while it comes from a variety of pistachio tree, it can only be harvested. The conditions are right for the production of the gum only on Chios in Greece. And subsequently, the stuff is kind of a pain in the butt to get a hold of, and it's very expensive. It is used in a liqueur. It's used in soaps. It's used in some specific and fascinating Greek desserts. It's chewed as a gum and as a stomachic to help with digestion, to combat things like acid reflux and irritable bowel syndrome. It's got an ancient pedigree. It's used widely. Its name pops up in incenses that you see in the Demotic magical papyri, in the Greek and Roman magical papyri, in the grimoires of Western Europe. And it is a significant one of the ingredients in kefi. It's a little bit like a pine resin, but again, it comes from pistachio lentic. I'm gonna mangle the Latin, and I suppose nobody cares anyway. The variety of tree it comes from is not a conifer. It's not a pine, even though it's got a little bit of a piney scent to it. It's more complex than that, and it adds something here that is pretty significant. But I'm trying to remember. I think 200 milligrams are like 37.50 euros. Uh, so not a small investment. And for a while with COVID, they weren't selling it anywhere. Um, but if you are curious like me and you really like the journey, uh, I have listed all of the different ingredients and all of the places that you can look these things up. The best book I've found is called Sacred Luxuries by Lise. Think Lisa with an E, so Lise, Maniche, Manniche. So Lise Maniche has a book called Sacred Luxuries. It's technically out of print, but you can still find copies of it. And it is probably the best and most informative text on, specifically ancient Egyptian incense, perfumery, and all of that stuff. It contains an entire chapter on kefi with a collection of all of the surviving recipes that have come down to us from the temples, from people's reports, from different papyrus, records and whatnot, as well as some insight into the debates about exactly what some of these ingredients are or were, because names occasionally change. In some cases, that particular subspecies of plant is now extinct. So the question arises, what do you do? How do you replace it? The most debated ingredient in kefi is something called peker. It's spelled pecker, but I'm a 14-year-old boy, and it just saying pecker, I just want to go her. It's usually rendered peker, and nobody's 100% sure what it actually was. There are theories that go everywhere from hashish, opium, on like the far end of interpreting it, to what's some of the other ones? The one I settled on, and I can kind of back up my citations comparing the word to a couple of other papyrus manuscripts, is sycamore, not Western sycamore, but the sycamore tree that is sycamore fig that was sacred in Egypt. If you've ever been to, an Egyptian exhibit and you've seen those sarcophagi that are made out of wood, they are almost always made out of sycamore wood. There's a whole story connected to Osiris about that. The sycamore leaves and the fruits had a significant role in the ancient world, especially the world of the ancient Middle East and ancient Mediterranean, and the connection to Osiris, along with the sort of sacred connection to remaking the body of Osiris with kefi, is why I settled on peker probably being sycamore. Now, the thing is there was no telling if it was the fruit or the leaves, but the placement in the ingredient list suggested that it was probably wood, because it was in the same spot as cinnamon and a couple of other things that were giving the incense body, that were giving it mass to burn and hold all of the resins together. By an absolute stroke of luck, because this is actually quite a rare wood, especially in the States, there was, I don't remember the name of the company. There was a company that had, they do like harvesting of trees that, fell over in people's yards and things like that. Someone had managed, and these particular trees really only grow from cuttings. Someone had a sycamore fig in California, and it had gotten old and diseased, and they cut off the bits that were bad and they saved the bits that were good. And I got a couple of little pen blanks worth of it and ground them down and added them to the kefi. And you hear about like sandalwood and agarwood and cinnamon as things that come from trees and tree bark that have a strong pungent scent and are used in perfumery and whatnot. You don't think of sycamore fig as something that goes there, but it had a very subtle but very complex sweetness to it. So sycamore fig might be one of the harder things to get a hold of. You can absolutely replace it with cedar. White cedar is my recommendation. There are a number of modern takes on kefi that use sandalwood, but I want to note that at no point in the ancient manuscripts or the ingredient list that appears on the walls at the Temple of Edfu is sandalwood mentioned. Like, it's not in any of them. Like, there's no debate about it. It's just not there. You can use it, but it doesn't seem to have been in the original recipes. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I this isn't something that I'm gonna be like, only I can make this. I if you want to turn this into a hobby for yourself, I'm not gonna like make a proprietary thing. I'm recreating something that's literally thousands of years old. I'm happy to share the knowledge and let other people play around with it and come up with like their particular take on things. I'm certainly not the only person who makes this stuff. There's a couple of sellers on Etsy. One of the things I will be uh, careful to note, though, everybody has a different take on what goes in here. So research, make sure you get an ingredient list so that you know that what you have in this is safe or as safe as possible, especially when you have allergies. There's a lot of pine in this, from pine nuts to pine resin. Now, weirdly, I'm super allergic to pine. For some reason, this does not fuck me up, but you may not be so lucky. So if you have an allergy to pine, be kind of aware of it. I put on my website a list of, possible things to try to use as substitutes. Sunflower seeds for pine nuts. Um, a couple of them I've tried out, and they're passable. Uh, the one thing that a lot of people, especially folks who are vegan, were like, well, honey. And another thing about honey is it was sacred to the ancient Egyptians. It was used as a medicine widely. And because like the bee was used as a representation for Pharaoh, there's a lot of symbolism and meaning. And in addition to sort of like the sacred symbolism of honey in this, there's the sheer fact that the honey is something that is used to help preserve this. It's one of the reasons this stuff, doesn't go bad. I do not know of a workable substitute for honey. So if honey is something that goes against your personal ethos, I'm sorry, I do not know anything that will replace it exactly. You will not get the same result if you try something that is not honey. Um, could you try to use maple syrup? Could you try to use molasses? You could certainly try. I will not attest that you will have a successful result. And the one downside is experimenting too much with this stuff is everything else costs so much that you are out a lot of money if after 6 or 8 months you go back to your batch and it's just screwed up. Every time I tweak the recipes, that's one of the things that's a little worrisome, is like there's so much that goes into it and such an investment of time. And yeah, the worry of just screwing it up is me. Will this video be on the website? Yeah, I don't see why not. Agave nectar, I haven't tried it. It might be a little too thin. The reason I suggest like maple syrup or molasses is like they're both coming from trees. At least I think molasses is from trees, or is it from fucking? It's from sugar. Anyway, sorry. I actually am not an expert on molasses beyond using them in certain cookies. Uh, do you let it age dry a bit before you form it? Yes. So, Hetty, to answer the question, since you're probably new in this was made in October and November of 2020. So we started it on October 31st. And typically it needs to be allowed to cure for 3 to 6 months. Uh, the 6 month mark, it depends on how basically how humid your area is. It's a lot drier here in the winter, and so it cured a lot faster. The scent deepens and becomes more complex and more subtle with time. And so, like a lot of perfumery sort of things and a lot of stuff like this, you want to let it set for a bit. So this is the earliest I've harvested and rolled the kefi. And again, it's I wish I could like really. So you've got the sharp, not sharp, like, but the bright resiny scent of frankincense. The deeper note of myrrh. There's the warmth of cinnamon, and then there's this sort of balsamy herbal sweetness. Things that go in here, mint goes in, but mint nilotica mentha, so basically Egyptian mint, which is quite different than our peppermint or spearmint. It's not as sharp. It's closer to catmint in the way it smells. And in fact, I've used catmint, aka catnip, as a substitute for Egyptian mint to great effect and to the great consternation of my cats when I'm making this stuff. Ozzy, who is a little catnip fiend, is practically climbing me when I'm adding that particular ingredient, and cat mint went into this one. Egyptian mint is a little tricky to get a hold of. I found a gardening place that sells it. I tried to grow it out here. It's not great in my garden. But to be fair, not many things are great in my garden. The soil out here is just shit. I try though. I keep trying. We'll see if it comes back next year. It did well enough to make flowers and have some seeds. So yeah, maybe it'll come back. You'd think mint is hard to kill, but it didn't do great. Thank you, Tony. I thought it was the byproduct of sugar making. Somebody had said it came from a tree at one point. I'm like, well, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I'd be curious with molasses or maple. The thing is there are enzymes in honey, and there's a lot of stuff going on with honey. And I think like this is such sort of like a finely tuned, almost chemical experiment. I think that it's more than just the sugar that is a significant part of why honey was used for this. One of the things I will be trying in coming weeks is making kind of like a wearable kefi. So not this whole process of the basis with the dried fruit and the honey and the wine and the boiling the stuff down for 8 hours, because that's fun. But I'm going to work with beeswax and kind of the same stuff that you use to make lip balm or wax melts. And I've got all of the essential oils that I could feasibly need. And I'm going to see if I can't recreate as close as possible to the complexity of this scent in something that we could then just have like in a little tin and anoint our ritual items with, anoint ourselves, add it to our daily beauty routine, whatever you want to do with it. And that will probably give rise to wax melts, which honestly will be a little bit easier to handle than trying to buy a fancy burner to get this stuff to burn in a way that it doesn't actually char. By the way, hi Tony, good to see you. Let's see. I mean, I kind of want the mint to be invasive. I'm cool with it being invasive. Our yard is kind of wildcrafted, so if it's full of Egyptian mint, I'd be happy. The thing is part of our yard is a lot of shade and a lot of wet, and I should have realized that if it's Egyptian mint, that it probably likes wet, and I put it in a place where it was just a little bit too dry, and lesson learned. I will relocate it, or I have tried to replant it in some better places. We'll see. The soil here also is just like really, I don't know if it's like really acid or really alkaline. There's a lot of red clay, but either way, it's just the combination of my black thumb and the soil, and it just doesn't do very well. Hello. Hey, everybody. Oh, Lindsay, you're probably popping in new. I am rolling the October 31st batch of an incense called kefi or kupar, which is made over a course of 10 to 15 days, cured for 3 to 6 months, and then hand rolled into little balls that are then heated over something that is between 150 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees if you are impatient, and releases a very, very complex aroma of frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, gum mastic, and a number of other ingredients. It was used as a sacrament and temple incense in ancient Egypt and became popular throughout the ancient Mediterranean. It was known as kapet to the ancient Egyptians, kefi to the Hellenic Egyptians, and kupar in Syriac. Yeah, try the sycamore fig. The thing is they're sycamore fig. If you've ever read that figs propagate by basically, uh, if you look up how figs actually are pollinated, they have a symbiotic relationship with a particular type of wasp that crawls into the fig and lays its eggs, and there's a whole bunch of, basically the figs you're eating are dead wasps and whatnot. And you'll see this passed around the internet as a scary thing to turn you off of figs. And the long and the short of it is, if I remember correctly, that specific wasp is extinct, or so rare that you aren't ever eating a fig that has been pollinated. Figs can't get pollinated so much anymore. Almost everything is grown, especially with the sycamore fig, from a cutting. So you don't get viable fruit. You still get fruit. You just don't get fruit that can make more fig trees. Hello, Mecca. Finally made it to the live video. I finally got the fucking thing working. Oh, I'm kind of excited the fact that, like, I'm pretty sure I don't necessarily have to dust this completely with powder. I usually use benzoin, because although it's not in the Edfu recipe, it does show up in a couple of the other ones. And the sweetness of benzoin, that sort of subtle vanilla scent, pairs really well, and just starts the kefi off with sweetness and just pulls all the honey notes forward. Yeah, the wax melts and essential oils are the next thing. I'm waiting on a couple of shipments to show up. I don't know if Amazon's doing this to you guys. I think we have just like one delivery person. Um, every third Amazon delivery that's supposed to show up here, and I try not to buy from Amazon, but there's some things where it's just kind of unavoidable. Like every third one, I get your Amazon delivery has been returned. It is undeliverable. And I'm like, bitch, you didn't even like stop by my door. So there's somebody who just doesn't care about actually dropping off their packages, which means that I've been waiting for a couple of things for a while, but we'll get there. Mm. Well, damn, Rat, if you've gotten mandrakes through the fruiting process, you and Christopher Penzak are about the only ones that I know of who've managed to do that, and that takes a lot of dedication and care. So, yeah, if anybody's going to get the sycamore fig to go, good on you. Hmm. Well, I appreciate everybody keeping me company because this can be kind of a dull task. Just sitting here rolling tiny little balls that, quite honestly, look a little bit like rabbit poop. I know that might not be the most appealing way to describe my ancient recreated incense, but it's tiny little balls of brown stuff with plant matter in them. I am very sticky now. So while I am curious about what is on my phone about my friend's father, I kind of don't want to put the phone. This is not something you want on your iPhone screen. I wish everybody could smell it too. Victoria, yeah, I'm running solo tonight. Illyria wanted to run a marathon on like elliptical or something, as Illyrias do. So we decided to split up again. And I think as long as I don't actually touch it, things will be fine. That was the common denominator in both cases when it didn't work yesterday, was I like actually started to like try to type something and it just went sideways. So it's this one has a stronger note of frankincense. The one that's really different is the one where I've called it. I've mentioned the lunar eclipse protection during the dark hours, because I changed a lot of the ingredients, not completely from the original recipe, but like so there's multiple recipes that have survived, and multiple interpretations of what some of those plants are supposed to be. And the lunar eclipse, I changed up a few. One in particular, so there is a plant called cyperus grass. It's also known as nutsedge. Similar to something called tiger nuts, which if you're into paleo, people use and sell as a flower. It's a little sweet. The ancient Egyptians used to mix it with honey and make these little pyramid-shaped little like loaves, little cakes out of it, and have it as a dessert. So nutsedge or tiger nuts go in the kefi, but a couple of translators suggest that instead that is galangal, and that's based off of, I think, commentary by Plutarch, might be Dionysus, but not actually the god Dionysus, but one of the writers from the Greek world with that name. But anyway, so galangal is a little bit like ginger. It's also a root. It's a tuber. It's sharp and hot and has like a kind of a fiery nature to it. And with the lunar eclipse, solar stuff, as much as like lunar eclipse, like I made it on the lunar eclipse, the idea was to have like that solar energy burning through the eclipse. And I tried to stretch out the making of that kefi from the lunar eclipse to the solar eclipse that we had. The timing didn't work perfectly, but I tried to put more solar stuff into that one. And it's a brighter and sweeter bouquet than, say, this one, which is very frankincense and myrrh. Did I study botany? I did not study botany. I have dabbled in herbalism and homeopathy for what, 20, 30 years. My degree is actually in comparative religious studies, with a concentration in psychology of religion. So I started off in the English department and the psych department with like a double major, and I sort of did this shotgun approach of, I've got an English major in there, and I've got the religious studies major in there, and I've got one class shy of a psych major in there because I was an overachiever. And yeah, so that's my academic background. My main focus since undergrad has been religious studies, with an aim less toward theology, more toward myth and folklore, like what people believe and why they believe it, and how those beliefs have shaped art and literature and history. And so that all kind of comes out in this, fascination for an ancient temple incense and why it was important and how it was cool. Let's see. Patty, how do you store it? How much do you use? A little, yes, a little goes a long way. So like I'm making these teeny tiny like little pea-sized things. You could feasibly like flatten this out, pinch it off, and put it like make half of this and still have a very significant like scent out of it. You store it in a cool, dry place. It won't go bad if it's somewhere where it's hot. It will just get very sticky. And it will stick together and become real gummy. And whatever it's in at that point is going to forever smell like kefi. I also, if you don't want to burn it right away, it's got such a permeating, pungent scent that if you have like a little sachet of it and you just like stick it in your jewelry box, you stick it in your underwear drawer, you stick it where, you know, in with like your clothing things, they also would use it to scent and freshen clothes. The ancient Egyptians, like this was a medicine. It was chewed as a breath freshener. It was used to freshen your clothes. So it was used in like, you know, this basically your clothes closet to kind of like permeate it with that scent. Um, it When you use it, uh, you can pinch off as much as you want. I've found that although traditionally it was burned in ball form, I've had the best results by flattening it down a bit and then putting it over the heat source flat so you have more surface area to be warmed, and you get a lot more scent out of it that way. There's a point once it's been over its heat source long enough that it gets kind of dark and hard. It's already pretty dark, but you'll know because it looks it sort of bubbles and boils, and then it just kind of stops having the sweet smell goes away. Uh, it'll start to smell a little burnt. It's not done yet. The cool thing about this is you can collect that, let it cool, grind it down, and now you can use it like you would the incense over a traditional charcoal. So you can burn that again. You can also use it in spell work. So add it to a sachet, strew it across you know, your threshold, particularly the protective one. Um, the properties of the stuff is all still in it. Let's see. Is it like weed? Too bad if it's not. So, fun story. Some folks, Mark Prescott, think that hashish was one of the things used in this. I disagree, based on different research things that I've done. But you can definitely find if you look, and I probably just Google whack kefi and pot. I know that there are at least two articles arguing that one of the ingredients that's debated, peker, Peker, was in fact cannabis. There are also some debates that I found suggesting that it was opium. Um, Obviously, not something I was going to experiment either way. I haven't tried, well, I live in Ohio, so we're not quite in a place where I could attempt with everything anyway. Um, but just based on where in the ingredient list pecker appears, I'm pretty sure it's not meant to be a green plant. It seems like it's a tree, and probably a wood, a ground wood, which is why I stick with sycamore wood. Sycamore fig, not sycamore poplar, not sycamores from over here in the US. It's been fun. So yeah, I'm standing here talking about ancient Egyptian temple incense recreated from a recipe that appears on the walls of the Temple of Edfu in what is called the laboratory room. It is that particular recipe is a little over 2,000 years old. It was burned as a sacrament each day. They would burn incense in the temples morning, noon, and night. This was the night scent. It was associated with enlivening the imagination, opening the gate of dreams, facilitating communication and connection with spirits and the gods. It was simultaneously an offering, a sacrament, and a way to facilitate interaction. There are associations with Osiris and reconstructing the body of Osiris, which was a pretty significant part of Egyptian religion by the time they got to the Ptolemaic dynasties. It is made from anywhere between 12 and 18 individually different ingredients. Some you'll recognize: frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon. Some are a little bit more rare, like gum mastic, aspalathos, cyperus grass, sweet flag. Yeah, that's the thing, Christine, is I'm pretty sure cannabis would change this and actually overpower it, which, like, I read, there's a couple of academic articles basically arguing this is supposed to be cannabis, blah, 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 blah. And having made it and like what the smell is, I'm like, those two things would not go together. I was skeptical of mint in this in the first place, but the mint, it's such a small amount that, and it's Egyptian mint, so it's not sharp. It's just a little, like, very lightly herby. But I think cannabis would really power it. I can hear my cat on the other side of the door wanting to get in. Cats aren't allowed in here. No cat hair in the kefi. Although, this is a funny thing. One of the ingredients in some of the alternate recipes is a resin, a plant resin from rock rose, called labdanum. It's used widely in perfumery. It is a fixative. It's a very, what we would associate as a masculine scent. It's that sort of like warm, thick, resiny musk that you find in a lot of perfumes and a lot of colognes. So it used to be harvested, because rock rose is like this thick, spiny thing that grows in hard to reach places in the Mediterranean. Goats apparently love this stuff. There are actually specific wooden combs that have survived and have come down through archaeological finds that were designed to comb the gum out of the goats' beards. So they would send goats to go eat rock rose. They'd get covered in the goo from the plant, and then they would very carefully comb all of the gum out of the goats' beards to collect labdanum, and use this precious resin. So the goats got a meal, and apparently a shave and a haircut. And the funniest thing to me was when I ordered labdanum from this little island in Crete. Swear to fucking God, there's goat hair in it. I picked it out, but that was a little bit more authentic than I was expecting. Uh, Probably want to switch to a different one, because I think we're running low on rolled versions from but it certainly looks like Silver Mirror is running low. I've got multiple different batches here. The batch we're working on is called Phoenix. And this is how I finish these little rolled balls of incense. This is full of very finely ground benzoin, styrax. It is a sweet smelling resin, also used widely in perfumery. And, oh, help. Got an escape soldier. And it dusts it just enough, a little bit like rice flour on mochi, and makes it a little bit less sticky to handle. point. I'm sticky, it's sticky, my fingers are covered in it. I think I got, oh, do. I'm sticky enough that I'm dropping kefi pieces all over the floor because they're sticking to my fingers and not coming off into the jar. Yeah, this is not something I recommend people do unless they're like really into research and like authentic stuff. Like it is not, I sell it. I am definitely not making like, if I figure like time and labor, because when you're, so you're putting the stuff together and you put it in the kefi mash and like that's like 10 days and then you boil it down after melting frankincense into honey and stirring that in, and you have to boil it for, it's taken as long as like 7 hours, like just in this special copper pot that is unlined, and like you can't walk away from it. Like you just have to pretty much just be over this stuff doing like double boil and trouble. If you pop around on my YouTube channel, you can probably find some of the previous kefi boils because I live stream, because it just gets boring as shit. And why not answer a few questions here and there while I'm doing it? I will say, having made kefi in the fall over the winter, I kind of prefer that because, first of all, it wasn't so hot in October when I was boiling, or actually November when I was boiling stuff down. And it's drier here in the winter, so it's cured faster, and that's also nice. Hey, Debbie, thank you. I don't know if anybody caught the Kindred Spirits episode last night. Now, I normally I don't watch any of the paranormal shows because I don't want to be spoiled on locations that I've never been to before. But I'd already done Haunted Salem Live with them, and had been to the Proctor House, so it's not like I was getting spoiled for anything. And I wanted to show my support for Greg and Dana, who are like really big about pushing the envelope for like how to investigate and like what tools we use. So I hope you had some fun with that. Yeah, I save them just to the ones that bounce on the floor just to make sure, because I mean there's cats in the house. They're not allowed in the room, but I just want to make sure there's not cat hair on the kefi, because that just seems like it would be mean. The stuff is so expensive. Ow. And this is what it looks like when I pull it out of this guy. And they're, now not quite so brown. I would normally be singing, just because I do that when I'm bored and standing around and working on things just with my hands. And the downside is even if I'm singing music I wrote myself, YouTube and Facebook's algorithms are so fast on the draw with copyright that I end up caught in a weird loop of going, but I wrote it. Like I get it. Like I know that is the song from Blood of Angels, but I wrote it. They're very funny about that. I usually have like a little fork that I use to pull these out. So now I'm covered in kefi and benzoin powder. Yay. I don't know about anybody else, but the rest of my night after this will probably involve putting my feet up, having a cup of tea, and watching an episode of Critical Role. I think I hear Illyria laughing downstairs. Illyria is the one who got me into watching it. it's kind of fun. I used to play D&D all the time, and like a lot of folks my age particularly, it just became impossible to have everybody actually be around to play the game anymore. So it's sort of like I get all the benefits of sitting around the table, goofing off with my friends, and none of the headache of having to be the DM every fucking week. Mad props to Matt Mercer, though, because I know how much fucking work goes into that. Jessica, yes, yes. There's something to be said for making it like the old-fashioned way and being mindful of every step and not taking any shortcuts. I had a friend who started off as a chaos magician, and in chaos magic, you're just kind of like whatever works, you do. You make use of whatever symbols, whatever objects, whatever like really grabs your brain and helps you focus on your intent. And he, at the time, had this really interesting epiphany of he can go to the grocery store and pick up a microwave meal and stick it in the microwave and make it and have food. He can also go through the process of making it from scratch, step by step. And while at the end he has a meal in either case, there is a difference in the quality and there's just a difference generally in the overall taste. So sometimes it's worth going back and doing it the hard way, step by step by step. And not to denigrate chaos magic and say that it's just a microwave meal, because it's not exactly, but the difference in labor. So that particular person turned into a ceremonial magician, and actually is one of the few people I know who did the full Abremelin working by the goddamn book to do the whole holy guardian angel thing, and is not like shitting you, like actually put the time in, got up, did everything by all of just the whole damn thing. Had quite the result because of it, and I don't know. I think it will vary from person to person, like what works for you. And of course, there's the consideration that we live in a very busy time, and it's really hard to find the kind of time to put into things like this. Not everybody has the luxury of either time or supplies. And I think it's important to realize that time is a luxury. Having supplies and like the space to do any of this stuff is a luxury that not everybody has. And you find what works for you, not just psychologically and emotionally and magically, but also practically based on your particular situation. I happen to be at a place in my life, at a time in my life where I can actually indulge in something this tedious, time consuming, and material consuming. And I can share it. And that's the fun part, is hearing from people who like get this stuff and are like, oh my God. Because it's sort of like reaching across the past. And I won't pretend that this is exactly what the incense in ancient temples smelled like, because I don't think it's possible to recapture that perfectly from where we're at. But yeah, it's a taste of it. It's close. Do 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 do. Shake and bake. Shake and bake the kefi. Here and Illyria, probably. Another lucky one. I will set that aside for you, Victoria. One of the reasons I have the luxury of both time and materials. And I want to, thank the folks for this. Is I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/haunted. And there are some wonderful people who help make all of these things possible and support me in both a monetary and an emotional sort of way, so that I have both, the financial ability and also like the spoons to sit down and go, hey, what would it be like to create kefi? How is that going to play out? And there was a time in my life where I was literally homeless. And I certainly spent many, many years being that person where, do I buy ramen or do I buy books? Do I pay for my cat's visit to the vet or do I pay for this bad tooth? So I did. But, I want to specifically give a shout out to all of the lovely people who support me on Patreon and make things like the kefi experiment a possibility, like feasible for me, and allow for all kinds of creative things. I mean, at this point, I'm able to also support my artist friend, Catherine Mason Rogers, and our friend Griffin Mandrakin, who add to all of the things that we produce and share. Most of my classes and stuff, and all of like the first crack at the kefi, all of that happens over on Patreon. And again, I can't type it out. It is up in the profile, but if you are curious, patreon.com/haunted. If you are interested in kefi, you can find both lunar eclipse and phoenix. Lunar eclipse and silver mirror currently available on the website. Phoenix, which is the one that I'm making right now, will probably next week. I mean, I will certainly make an announcement when it goes live on the site. We have these nice little labels that Kat Mason designed, and it goes in a little tin, and there's like a whole production for sending it out to people. There's a card that comes with it now that tells you, here's how you burn it, here's what's in it, here's a little of its history, probably more information than you ever really wanted to know. But I'd rather give you more information than less. And again, recipes are up on my website. So if you don't want to buy it and you want to try to make it yourself, you're welcome to. Or if you're just curious. Also, if you want to figure out, like, am I allergic to the stuff in this? Because that's important as well. Wouldn't want you to buy some and then find that, nope, this is not something you can burn in your home. Yeah, cat stuff I love. Yeah, one of my favorite things with the Patreon is the Discord. Is just like, I know that not everybody is like computer savvy, and it can be a little bit of a learning curve, but just the community and people hanging out and supporting one another, especially through this year. 2020 was a hard year to be alive, to be human. I mean, like, it's just really rough year. Like, so many things going on, so many stressors. We've had to change and adapt so many things in our life. And having folks that we can just go and vent to, hang out with, be silly with, be magical with, and not be judged by is, I don't know, it did help me get through. I don't know about anybody else. Okay, I am about running out of steam here. I've determined I'm going to get like this last chunk that I've pulled out here. But I think I will be winding down as I have kefi under all of my fingernails. And I think my fingers will just stick together if I allow them. And my little shake and bake container is probably needs a refresher of benzoin powder. So sourcing this stuff, I have no problem sharing some of my places. There is a company called Herbco. It's the Monterey Bay Spice Company, I believe, is their business name, but the website is herbco.com. Really good prices on a lot of things. And I used to get most of my frankincense and myrrh from Wild Tree Essentials, but it was a husband and wife company, a very small company, and they were fantastic. And then they both caught COVID. And while they recovered, they took that as an opportunity to like seriously reassess what they were doing with their company, and they tooled back very significantly what they offered. So now they only exclusively offer hojari, the green hojari incense, which is like the cream of the crop when it comes to frankincense. And it's a little bit more than what I want to put into the kefi. So if you are interested in the best frankincense I've ever smelled, Wild Tree Essentials is definitely a company to look into. You will be paying commensurately for the quality of the incense that they're selling, but it's pretty neat stuff to sample at least once. Let's see, some of the simpler things. Spice Inc. inc.com, and in an unrelated to kefi thing, Spice Inc. actually has some of the best non-salt spice blends for culinary use I have run across. I was raised on a low salt to no salt diet, which means that most traditional blends of spices are a little too salty for me. And the blends that they have, Spice Inc. is they're awesome. They have an entire section of different chili peppers, every variety of cinnamon you could possibly fucking want. And their prices are pretty good. I mean, as much as like I want to support like Penzies, I like Penzies as well. Spice Inc. The prices were a little bit better than Penzies too. Not to knock Penzies, folks. Like they've been pretty cool. For gum mastic, there is a little shop in Crete. So you will wait for it to show up, and there will be taxes and tariffs. And this stuff is not cheap, but it is the best source that I've found for it. It's also where I buy my labdanum, and occasionally my galbanum when it's in stock with them. They also sell a couple of other specific to Crete, Dittany of Crete, and their shop's name is Botano. So think like botanica. So Botano, botany, just with a botano.gr. So, but their little shop is sweet and adorable, family owned, cool people to work with. Yeah, they also sell like the gum mastic liquor, the gum mastic candy, just pretty neat things. Oh, if you can hear that, Bliss is very mad that there is a closed door between her and I. Trying to think of some of the other sources. Cyperus root is just a pain in the butt to find, and I usually have to source it through like Ayurvedic medicine sites. So from India. I was using smallflower.com for a couple of the things like calamus, and that one's orris root, but the sweet flag calamus root, and I think I got my Egyptian lemongrass from them too. Whispering Times, I would be happy to share recipes. So my go-to these days has been My middle of the day meal is a half a can of low sodium chicken broth as a base, and I've got to be low fat as well. I know this is a huge version from kefi, but it's sort of all alchemy as far as I'm concerned. Laughing cow cheese, those little like not completely fake cheese wedges. I can't have like regular cheese so much anymore, but two little wedges of laughing cow cheese. You melt it into the broth, and I add some white pepper and some dried onions and some garlic powder and spices. Spices Inc. has this citrus blend, which is rosemary and thyme and a little bit of red pepper and a bunch of other things. And it's really good for like for a savory, like lighter, herby sort of chicken dish. Put probably a good heaping tablespoon of that in there, simmer everything. I will add a bunch of finely chopped spinach, and today it was broccoli. Yesterday it was English peas. I prepare little portions of chicken that I've cooked ahead of time and freeze and dunk some of that in there. And you can add rice, or you can add noodles, or you can just like whisk a little bit of flour in there and just make a thick soup. And it's nourishing and hearty and low in salt and low in fat and just pretty much all around good and tasty. I am just about done with doing this. I will be out in a minute, Bliss. We joke that my cat is the mistress. She certainly treats me like she is the mistress. Very demanding little thing, especially everything is wrong in her world if I'm in the wrong room. What I should be doing is sitting on my recliner in my office with a cat on my lap, and woe be to me, for the human is not listening to the cat. Shake, 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 shake your kefi. Shake, 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 shake your kefi. Also, I'm very silly. Ah. Yes, placing a closed door between me and the cat is just high sacrilege, blasphemy. Do, 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 do. Almost done with the chunks that I pulled off. At this point, it's just sheer determination to finish this up. And also you can see like I have barely chipped away like the main chunk of kefi. I'm going to be going through this for a very long time. Good question. From Josh, do I put a lot of stock into protective stones, black tourmaline, stuff like that? Um, so I'm a big believer that a symbol has exactly as much meaning as we put into it. Um, there's some exceptions to that rule, like a lot of herbs. That's where medicines come from. They're like willow bark, which was chewed for centuries as an analgesic to like combat headache and whatnot. That's where acetylsalicylic acid comes from. Salicylic, salis. So aspirin comes from willow bark. Is what I'm saying there. So there are some things where folk wisdom is actually pointing toward an honest to goodness chemical, medical, biological reality. And then there's things that is more, or things that are more about what you believe and what works for you, like what speaks to you, what helps you focus on the magic and the power in you. And I think that a lot of things from crystals and stones and color therapy and stuff like that, a lot of that, at least in my opinion, has more to do with you than it does with the objects that you are using. And for some people, stones and crystals really resonate and they are incredibly powerful. My friend Christopher Penzak works widely with things like that, and they do things with and for him that they do not do for me. Like that stuff does not communicate with me the same way. I don't get the same result. And I don't think that that's a failing on my part. I think it's just a difference in what we resonate with and what we connect to. So just because black tourmaline doesn't really work for me doesn't mean that it won't work for someone else. I keep pieces of it at Inspiration House when we've got investigators there and people who are trying out their mediumistic skills. There's quartz points, there's a bunch of other stones, because to me, it's just another set of tools. Pendulums, and I see very little difference between a stone and a pendulum and a K2 meter in terms of they're all tools. You will have different results for different people. Some people will have great results with a K2 meter. Other people will have much more results with a pendulum or with dowsing rods. And it all depends on that person and on their particular path, their training, their inherent abilities. And no one can define for you what those are going to be. Like, you have to experiment and see what really speaks to you. So that's sort of my thing on that is, do they have an inherent power? Potentially, but there's a key that unlocks that, and if you don't have that key, it's just a rock. One last tiny piece. I mean, I lied, actually. There's another piece over here, but it's the one that I dropped. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, could be cookie dough. This one is much less sticky than the other ones. The difference in this batch was, so the very first batch I made in 2019, if you look up on the kefi part of my site, you'll see a tin that has a clear plastic bit and has what looks like, I don't know, a square chunk of sugar dusted fudge in it. It's just a square. I gave up on rolling that first batch of kefi because it was so sticky. I made it with dates, and whoa, was it sticky. Now, there were a couple of factors, I think, as I was trying to roll it, especially in summer and fall in Northeast Ohio. It's really humid here, so there's just no way that it wasn't sticky. But like even now, it's still much stickier and gummier than this. And I don't know that you can see it very well, but like this one's shinier. This is the silver mirror. It is still a little softer and a little stickier. There are two recipes on the walls of the Temple of Edfu, and they have very slightly different measurements, particularly for the resins that go in the incense. And so I experimented in this one with upping the resin just a little bit and reducing the fruit content just a little bit. And the difference is sort of astounding. This one is much harder, denser, and certainly less sticky for the rolling. which is really nice because I was really worried that the 2019 version, which we aren't selling currently, I don't know that I will sell anymore, like, there's very little left. I despaired of I just sort of figured that I had invested all this money and all this time, and I just fucked it up royally. It's got a smell that, like, is indescribable. It is amazing. Now, the difficult thing is the burn points are different as well. The more resin you put in it, the more it will tolerate being a little hotter. I haven't tried this directly on a charcoal, and like I said, if you burn kefi directly on a self-lighting charcoal, it will scorch and you're kind of screwing up the kefi. You want to burn it low and slow, ideally over something like a bakur burner. Treat it a little bit more like a wax melt that needs a temperature between 150 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Most wax melters are a little too low, and they're only going to be like maybe 120. They won't do anything but make your kefi sticky. But they do make burners that allow you to go between 100 and I think 250. So anyway, the higher resin content means that it will tolerate a higher heat point and won't smell like burnt sugar. But that first 2019 batch was it really has a very low point. It does not tolerate a lot of heat at first, and it just it's so sticky. Having done this now, I am inclined to step back just a touch on the resin. I think I could do with just a little bit less, but that's the fun of experimenting. Oh, it's pricey. Like there's no two ways about it. Um, I could I should do a breakdown of how much this stuff costs, like the ingredients, just the ingredients, not the time, which you can see is considerable. Yeah, realistically, I'm pretty sure that I'm not necessarily making up, uh, certainly not like time and materials, but I'm gonna make it anyway, so I might as well sell it. Felicia, I wish I could help you. One of the problems that I have, I've done police work. I've been asked to find dismembered body pieces a couple of times, and that's never any fun. One of the reasons that I don't like offer that service anywhere, like on a website or whatnot, is what I tune into first and foremost are people and people's emotions. Uh, Everything else kind of comes after that, and what that means is it kind of hobbles me for emotionally charged situations where a lot of people are really desperate or hurting or hoping about something and have a lot of ideas in their head about like what might be happening, because what I'm going to pick up first is what everybody's worried about. I'm going to pick up what people are thinking about, having nightmares about, like all of this noise, and it makes it very, very difficult for me to get to a point of information that I trust. And those situations are so crucial, like so many people's heart health hinge upon a good answer, a right answer, a clear answer. I don't feel that I can give one based on the way my abilities work. And I wouldn't ever want to give someone false hope or the wrong answer. Like that would do more harm than good. So the only thing that I can say is I hope that they find her and I hope that she's safe. And I hope that the terrible things that people are worried about right now for her stay only that, stay as only worries. What level do I place incense when it comes to offerings? I think it depends on the incense. Like if it was just like some, Nag Champa that I picked up at the hippie store down the street, that's not necessarily like a huge offering. I mean, it is an offering, but it's not like it cost me much. It's not something that I've invested a lot of myself or my energy in, or that somebody else has necessarily done so either. So I think for offerings to me, an offering needs to have meaning and energy, and it doesn't necessarily have to have cost in a monetary fashion, but it has to have some value. Uh, Whether that value is the time you invested in it, the love and the care that you've put into crafting it, I think that heightens the utility and the meaningfulness of an offering. So, to make it a sort of a silly way of saying it, if you bake the cookies yourself versus buying them at the grocery store, the homemade cookies as an offering are always going to be better. That said, in terms of like cornmeal or sage or tobacco, I think it depends on who you're working with and who you're making that offering to. Uh, I wouldn't offer cornmeal to Papagede. I would offer rum or cigars. And you have to know who you're dealing with and what they want. I have finished what I have set out to make for tonight, and I am very happy about that. And now I am covered in kefi and dust. Yeah, my let's see, respectful way to dispose of offerings that are not physically removed by who you're offering them to. Uh, I usually will take things like that and then give them to nature. Um, put them out for whatever might eat them. Now, I happen to live in an area where there's plenty of like wild places where I can put stuff out. There's a spot in my little garden that has a little house that I just extra things I just put them out there. Now, obviously, that's things that are not toxic, that are going to be edible for the wild animals, stuff like that, which does not include tobacco. Otherwise, I burn stuff when possible and then scatter the ashes. And in a pinch, and I felt a little bit bad about it. We had done an offering for our disembodied. That ritual for us is coming up at the end of this month, and we each person had given different things that were important to them, and they all just sat in the offering bowl for a while, and some things went away and some things didn't, and kind of taking a cue from the Catholic Church that I was raised in. I took the things that I had to dispose of, treated them with respect, wrapped them in something, and then put them separately uh, in the trash, because some of them were things that weren't easily disposable in a safe way any other way. But treating it with respect was important to me. Hello to Amanda, and hello to Jenny, Victoria, Bernadette. Oh, I love your name, Bernadette. Uh, Felicia, Serial. Okay, so you're all wonderful. I want to go wash up. We're going to see if I can actually like touch and broadcast with my knuckle, because all of my fingers are stuck with very sticky stuff. But this was lovely. Thank you for keeping me company. I will probably be rolling more kefi in the next couple of days, and I'll probably live stream while I do it. So have a lovely night. Happy New Year, and may this year be better than the last.